Before we begin, please be advised that this show may contain some adult themes that may not be appropriate for all listeners. Use your discretion. Now, on to our show. And now, part two of our episode on 1763.
I'm not drinking my cold Brita water.
Nice.
I felt the dehydration coming.
I just saw these cans are 10%.
Well, good for you, Greg. Turning it up.
Yeah,
What was that one called again, Greg?
the Master Blaster, which is actually a really fucking badass
I didn't
video
even
game.
okay.
No,
I didn't
it's a
even
dude's
remember
drink.
what it
I told
was,
you.
and I'm like, yep, that's good.
Yeah,
I still
it
just have a
says
lot of
hazy
water.
IPA with Erebus, Strata, and Eldorado hops.
Oh,
I don't
nice.
know anything about the differences between these hops, but
Okay, well,
I hope you guys enjoyed.
Randy, I don't know how I feel about your part of the
I
episode. It really
know. I know.
I know my part sucked, so enjoy the next part.
I think my
Like
part sucks too.
every time I'm sorry about it, but I don't care. I like this is the truth. And sometimes I tell fun stories that make you angry instead of sad.
No, I really enjoyed it because I know a lot more about the British side of things and like what's going on between Britain and the colonies. So getting that like this is also going on in the Dutch world in 1763 was I learned a lot. It was really good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we get really focused on ourselves, don't we?
I do all the time. Hmm. But it makes sense. I mean, this is the history we know. I feel like even this stuff, it's like things I knew, but not deeply. And I didn't understand the plight of the poor man in the United States until I started doing my research. Like, oh my God, this is like we were talking about it, I think, before last episode. Like, where you just start becoming a conspiracy theorist and you can't trust anything.
Yeah.
And like I have to my brother asked the other day, can you tell when things are AI? And I used to be able to, and some days I can't. Like, and I don't know what kind of world I live in anymore. Every time I look at social media, it is another like, I don't know.
Hmm.
But anywho, and so in doing my research, I was going to focus on something completely different, but obviously I had to provide a ton of context before I even got there to the point where I just started somewhere completely different. But it's still 1763, adjacent. Um, we got to give some before. So I was doing some research on the American Revolution, and the French and Indian War or the Seven Years' War kept popping up, and I couldn't get over the fact that I didn't know what it was or what was going on or what was fighting, what was, why are they there? But yes, the context, as Randy likes to say.
It honestly, you cannot tell. I'll be I just really want someone to come on here and try to tell one of these stories without giving any context because I think it is what gives so many people the wrong impression of these stories in the first place, right? Without having the context, it's really easy to make a different kind of assumptions or draw different kinds of parables and what's the word I'm looking for? Like not motives, but like
Like connections or
yeah, just themes. They draw different resolutions out of that story without the context.
yeah. Well, I think going deeper into these stories is what really like that's what really makes it to where you get that richer, like more nuanced understanding of things because you find these stories that are not part of that main narrative that you get in school or something, you know?
Yeah.
That's true. They are really deep. It is kind of funny because I've was thinking about what we've covered in American history so far, and really we have mostly covered just the beginning. Like what brought the British here, what kept them here, and kind of what financial gains they were able to make on the new land, and how needing to make those gains created the need for labor.
Yeah, and to be perfectly clear, we're just talking about the beginning of colonization and the beginning
Yes,
of what shaped the America that we know.
exactly.
I say that specifically because I Karina and I try not to center the westernized white point of view, but it's so essential to the stories that we're telling that we give the context of how they were shrouding the work that they were doing, right?
Mhm.
Okay, now I'll stop, Karina. Please go on about your American Revolution. I know that it's not this year, but you're leading up to it.
I am leading up to it. But okay. So I'm leading up to it by talking about the 7 Years' War. So the reason that this war even happened was because the British were not the only ones that were colonizing everything. The French were hanging out in Canada, traveling. The French were up there near the Ohio River Valley, and the British were also up there. And they were like, where is the border? What is going on? The British were like, no, it's time to keep going and fight these people. So they sent the Colonel George Washington to kick out the French in 1754, but they were unsuccessful. So he goes back, and then the British Prime Minister was like, it's time to attack again. But then the French found out before anyone was actually able to do any attacks. So then the French were like, oh, it's on. And the book said full scale war. And I was like, explain to me the small scale war. What is the difference? What's going on? Is one with the cannons, when there's no cannons? Like, what is the
Actually, this is a really good question. Greg, do you have an answer?
what is a full scale war? Makes it full? Does it in writing
You know,
war?
I I don't know. I don't have a great answer for that.
I don't know either. I was like, interesting. All right.
We'll revisit this, and please post on the Discord if you have any ideas on what this might be.
Or comment
I'd
anywhere.
love a firm definition.
I don't know either. So basically, it's official. It's official. Britain and
Less
France are
France,
in
I'm
fight.
like going to war with you. Like,
It's official. Will you go to war with me? Heart. So then King Charles III of Spain is like, oh my God, my cousin Louis is having issues with the British. So he wants to get in on the fight too. He says if they don't come in, if the fight doesn't end by 1762, the Spanish are going to join in. So it's like, if you don't stop it, my big brother's going to come and he's going to send all of his troops to kick your ass too. And so then the British were like, we're declaring war on you. Good luck, Spanish. And so they did. And they fought until 1763 when they signed the Treaty of Paris and they all agreed that Great Britain won. So they won a ton more land in North America, including territory east of the Mississippi River, Spanish Cuba, French Caribbean islands, and the Philippines. So this is like a huge gain
mhm.
for the British and their colonial endeavors. Yes, Randy, do you have anything?
Yeah, I'm just thinking there were a lot of players in that war. I didn't realize that it was so many countries involved in that.
And
I
that's
think that's
how
where the full scale might come in because it's like almost a world war, right?
Yeah, that's
Before
what
like
I was
World War
actually,
One.
that was
No, I
my
mean
next question,
literally.
Greg.
that makes sense. It's not
Yeah,
just
no, I
like
mean literally. So like, I mean, I know a
one.
little bit about this. Like, there's fighting in India, like at this time, because everyone's like, "All right, we're going to fucking war," and so that's like part of. There's fighting like literally on almost every continent at that time. So that might be what they mean by total war.
I could see that where it was just like one more war in this year of wars.
Yeah, but just like there hasn't been one of this scale where like fighting breaks out in like almost every colonial space.
I guess my question now is how do they define, like, who decides that wasn't a world war? Who
I think we
decides
do, right?
what
Historians.
yeah, I'm like you, Greg, as a historian, as an author.
I just had never understood how, like, early in the history, all of these lands were obtained by the British. I just had never, real talk, I never thought about it that hard. I just thought in my brain, like, slowly as they moved over, we just slowly gathered it, just a little more at a time. But I'm seeing how the puzzle pieces work now, and it's very uncomfortable.
It's always so funny to me what people remember from
Maybe
their
I blocked
history
it out on
lessons.
purpose, Randy. But also, I don't know how in depth we go into these things because let me tell you, one of my favorite topics when I was in college was American history. Like, I loved it. I thought it was phenomenal. I don't remember most of this or any of this.
Well, you were a kid, you were getting a lot of
That's fair.
information.
I was gonna say
I
you also like majored in something else. Like I majored in history, so I just like stayed in this, you know?
Greg,
But
I
think
never
about
left.
no, no, well for real, but like think about your average person, like I don't know. I don't know how they did it in Arkansas in terms of like sequencing the classes, but when I was in school in Texas, we learned about this in eighth grade. So
Yeah.
think about like all the other things you have going on in eighth grade,
That's a
you know?
13-year-old also, Karina. I just want to like put an age stamp on that. That's like average age
Yeah, 13,
13.
14. Yeah, because
13,
my
14.
son's in seventh grade and he
I'm
just
literally
turned
thinking,
13.
well, it's not just that either, but it's like, think of me specifically as a 13-year-old.
No, I'm
I
thinking
was
of
like,
myself as a
yeah,
13-year-old
yeah.
too,
13-year-old
just
me was reading books to escape from my life. So I
Yeah.
was was
yep.
busy. I think
Yeah.
I don't feel like I understood it to the extent that I do now. But what I mean is I learned this in college. I remember sitting there and taking a shit ton of notes
Oh
about
yeah, yeah, yeah.
slavery.
Oh,
So I was like, where was this?
yeah.
But I
The
feel like a
only
lot
thing
of
I
the story,
remember,
uh-huh.
the only thing I remember about the French and Indian War, quite honestly, when you said you were going to be covering it, is that the natives had killer tactics that the French benefited from. And that was what my happy heart took away from that encounter. That's literally the only thing that I remember, is that the natives had guerrilla war tactics and that impressed them, and that's what gave the French such an advantage that it scared the British.
Yeah.
That's literally all I remember.
I think of the dressing. Isn't there a French island dressing or something? Thousand
Like
Island
French
dressing?
dressing.
I think that's what it is. It reminds me of
Well, I think
Thousand
there's two
Island
dressing.
dressing.
I
Salad!
think there's Thousand Island and there's French, you know?
Yes, and I combine them in my brain and I'm
So
like,
it's
that's the
French
war.
Thousand Island.
Karina, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard.
I decided that this episode I was just gonna say every thought that popped into my brain. And so I
I
was like,
I
oh, good
really
luck.
love that this is where we're at.
Good luck, everyone.
I really do.
No, but I really did think it was I knew it wasn't a I just think about dressing. I don't know why. I think it's just the name. But anywho, yeah, no, it was a ser that's the issue is that I ran into is that I was like, what is this war they keep talking about? And so because you I was learning about the Stamp Act and in order to learn about the Stamp Act, I had to understand that they had to pay for this and
Hmm.
what do they have to pay for? Why were they in a war for so long? Anyway. Yeah, so the British were doing all that and they get all this land, which is great for them and only them. So they solved this one issue and now they get the French out of their way. But now they have to pay for this war. And that also meant taxes for the colony. So now the colonists have fought in this war and now they're getting taxed about it. And what conditions were the colonies in? A quote from one of my main sources today, A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. Um, I really liked this quote because I felt like it was a good representation of the condition that the country was in. But the war had brought glory for the generals, death to the privates, wealth for the merchants, and unemployment for the poor. And what my main focus is mostly what the poor were doing because most of this history and the part that really pissed me off was that all the people that were main players in this game, all the generals, all the like people that were making this law and making this new country were people of upper and middle classes. It was not the poor. And it really made me so upset to think about the amount of work and labor and money that has been made on the backs of the poor. And at what cost? And like, it's just, anyway,
Would it make you feel better to know that despite being run by the Dutch West India Company, despite being run by first the 17 gentlemen, then the nine gentlemen,
sick,
because
Randy.
yeah, I don't know, that's what they called themselves, the nine gentlemen t at the end. They got most of the profits, but they allowed anyone to buy in to shares in the Netherlands. It did not matter what your rank or status were. So I will say they, as an entire country, truly, the Netherlands benefited from enslavement and the transatlantic slave trade. I don't know if that's like better or worse though. Do you know what I mean? Is it
Yeah.
better? Is it worse? You let everyone get to be a part of this immoral opportunity?
Hmm. They made their choices. I mean, we could, like, we all have a choice. You could have, nobody told you to go out and take your ships and go take people and start trying to take over lands. Nobody told you to go do that. You went and did it because people had money to be gained from it. That's why you went and did it. It's not, no one is holding a gun to your head and being like, you better colonize right now. No one's doing that. Anyway, well now, okay, so now they've been busy colonizing, so now they have to pay for their colonizing endeavors. And who to pay for that but the poor people? So the imbalance of money and power was not just limited to like the southern colonies. Throughout the last few episodes, we've talked about the creation of the Carolinas and how that was really built on a foundation of imbalance and keeping the rich and the money at the top and the poor at the bottom while profiting off of the labor. Just because the northern states were more like city and building and like there were more cities up there didn't mean that there was more distribution of wealth. The wealth was still pretty evenly kept up at the top. It was a very small 5% of Boston taxpayers who were controlling 49% of the city's taxable assets.
It's still better than what we've got today.
That's embarrassing, Randy, because I was like, "Oh, so it's not gotten it's the same shit." Great.
Yeah, I was gonna say that that tracks with all of New England, and
Right.
you see that even today in parts of the city that you have to have been from a wealthy family that's been there forever
Hmm.
to buy properties and stuff.
I've been to Boston once and it freaked me out and I do not
Well,
like it. I am a country woman.
oh,
So
well, okay. Now I
I
love
love
Boston.
Boston
Don't
because
be
I that's the area
Stress
where
me
I
out.
I always go up there to do research because I do New England history. So
Those are your
I really
people.
enjoy Boston. But
I
I'm
went to
also
school
there
in
doing my
Boston.
thing and I'm going to archives and then doing like maybe a few touristy
No,
things and then
no, no.
crashing.
No, I went to school there. I spent a good 4.5 years wandering around that city. Love Boston.
I don't
Love
want to do
them.
anything in Boston. It stresses me out and it gives me
You
anxiety
know,
and it makes
I
me
have
want to
to say,
cry.
the first time I went there, though, I had the best experience. I got in and went to my best friend's brother's apartment there and smoked a bunch of weed because I was
Hmm.
staying at his place. And then I went and saw the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones play for their Christmas like hometown show.
That's fun.
Yeah. So
Boston,
like
oh,
my
there's
first
always
exposure to Boston was great.
I honestly can't say enough good things about Boston. But that's only like because the city is so large and diverse enough that you can have a good experience there. I'm not discounting what you're saying though, Karina, because they did a study, I want to say like 5 to 10 years ago, about the economic disparities between Black people in Boston and their white counterparts. And basically, it was like the Black community had, on average, about $13 of equity and assets. And like when everything came out, they broke out at $13, whereas the average white Bostonian was like at $400,000 in
Oh
assets
wow.
and financial stability. So it was an absolutely insane disparity amongst the two groups. So I'm not saying Boston is perfect or anything. I'm just saying.
Randy, there is still disparity there.
I'm
It
just
has not
saying.
changed.
I'm just saying, remember people, as I have had to say to so many people this past week, there are still beautiful things and good things amongst all the rubbish. Just
That's
gotta
very
look
true.
for it.
So the poor in Boston and other areas had begun having meetings about their conditions, and the governor of Massachusetts had written that at these meetings there were the meanest inhabitants generally that the meanest inhabitants were generally the majority, and they would often outvote the gentlemen, merchants, and substantial traders and all the better part of the inhabitants. So really they were like, there's a bunch of poor people here and they're all terrible looking. There's all of this discontent and the poor are upset. And what do you do? But you start to try to kind of rally people to be on your side, right? Because you need to
Hmm.
have people to fight in this revolution. And the people that had the time, money, and energy to do these things are those of the upper classes, like lawyers, editors, merchants who had the money, but they were excluded from doing any of the ruling things in England. So they start these little parties. They get to know different artisans and like merchants and mechanics, and they talk to other people and they go on tour. And it's men like James Otis, who is a lawyer and a speaker, an orator, and Samuel Adams, who was a full-time politician, which I did not realize was a career that you could have. But there you go.
This
So
is
if you,
Sam Adams, right?
yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Hmm.
So they're doing these speeches at the taverns and where other people go, like at political meetings, they're just trying to rile people up, get people thinking.
That's one of the things Sam Adams is good at, though, is like he's a rich guy who knows how to hang out with the poor people
Right.
and like rile them up.
Well, and it's interesting because we're in the book, it really talks about how their speeches and their writing were made to mold the labor class's opinion, to figure out, like, to give them a specific thing to be mad about and a direction to point that anger, and to use the anger and the discontent they already had because they were poor, because they were going through stuff.
Fox News.
Oh my God.
Yeah, sorry. I
To be
had something
mad,
stuck in my throat there.
specific people. Right. No, and that's as I was doing my research, I had like done some skimming and then I was like, oh, this is where the story's going to go. And then I was doing more in-depth research and I was like, this is what we have to talk about because it never stops. People just know what to say to turn you one way or the other, or to attempt to turn you one way or the other. And if you're not solid in your opinions, it's really easy to sway one way or the other. So, according to Gary Nash, a man I Googled who is a historian,
I love Gary Nash. I've taught his book in I literally use his Unknown American Revolution in my American Revolution class. Every
lit
I feel a new
every
sticker.
time I teach it, his,
I
his
fuck
book
with
will not
Gary
be
Nash.
dethroned.
well,
No, 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 for real.
I read the I read the book and one of the people he just referenced him. He didn't say anything else. He just said, according to Gary Nash. And I was like,
Do I know who this
just
is?
Gary.
Oh, no,
According
no,
to
no. So
Gary.
so he's a heavy hitter, right, in terms of like historians, right? All right, so hold on. This is just a random aside. You can cut this out if you don't want to, but like this is me geeking out about historians. So
No,
there's
I'm
actually
enthralled.
a bit in Good Will Hunting about this. So I will tie this to pop culture. Like if you've seen the movie,
Yes.
you know, Good Will Hunting, right? Where he
How
like
about them
he
apples?
I
Right.
have
So he
not seen the
tells this
movie.
dude off in the bar, and like literally, it's like a history argument in like the way that he insults this dude, where he's like, "You're just repeating this bullshit, and you don't know what you're talking about." So there's this guy named Bernard Balin who is a really big like he's done a lot to shape like how we interpret the American Revolution, and he had a protege named Robert Gross, I believe. And then Gross had a protege, Gary Nash. So, or no, 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 sorry, it's not Gross. it's Balin, it's Gordon S. Wood, and then Wood was like the professor who mentored Gary Nash. So that's like three generations of scholars, writing in about a 20 or 30-year period. But Nash is
Wait,
incredible.
there's enough material there for three renowned scholars to be focused on a 20-year period?
Well,
And to
no, I
be
mean like
renowned.
within the span of like 20 or 30 years, you
Oh,
have
oh,
three
oh,
scholars who all do
oh,
like a ton in the
oh.
field, right? So like Balin's thing was about like the ideas of the revolution and how what was the philosophy and the ideas that shaped it from a very like intellectual, like when we're talking like Thomas Jefferson kind of that sort of person way of thinking, right? So it's like the Washington, Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, like elite kind of people. And then Gordon S. Wood was like, that's cool, but there's a lot of radical philosophy, and we need to look at like the fringe radical kind of people, right? And so he like took that to the next level. And then Wood was like, yes, but we actually need to look at like everyday people, common people who were also pretty fucking radical and riotous and like hated the rich. And that's kind of where Nash lands, right? In like looking at everyday people and marginalized people. And that was like innovative for the 1970s or so when he started writing.
That's wild that it took people that long to be like, there's others out there.
No, I mean
Like
literally,
the
like
everyday people, like that was when the everyday people started getting written about, Greg?
the 60s and 70s, really.
Wow.
Like there's a whole movement in like English history called like the new social history that was basically like we're going to start looking at like we've looked at kings and lords and monarchs. Let's look at what the poor people were doing. And that's like the 1960s.
The
That,
poors are people too.
No,
Wow.
I
well,
mean,
I'm
like,
also
no, it's
wondering,
wild when you think about it, though, because we're only
anthropologists.
60 years removed from like the realization in society and like how we do history that people who aren't super rich matter.
That's disturbing.
It is.
And
Well,
also, again, I'm going to say, what were the anthropologists doing? Where was their work being published? Because they love the everyday person, right? Like, not anthropologists. Yes, anthropologists and archaeologists. That's what I was thinking of.
I can't speak for the archaeologists. I can
I
only
can't either.
speak for according to Gary Nash.
Just like I don't I don't understand any of that. That's wild. I'm going to be processing that for a while,
Hmm.
Greg. Thank you for that information.
No, but like Gary Nash gets like 5 stars in my book. Like, I would highly
Nice.
recommend reading anything he writes.
Yeah, he seemed real important, like Gary Nash. Anywho, but he described James Otis as a man who was keenly aware of the declining fortunes and the resentments of the ordinary townspeople. So he knew what some of the issues were. He recognized their problems, but he definitely took that to his advantage. An example of the kind of speech James Otis would give in a tavern really kind of tickled me. Okay. Remember, he is a lawyer and a speaker. That's his job. I am forced to get my living by the labor of my land, the sweat of my brow, as most of you are, and obliged to through good report and evil report for bitter bread, earned under the frowns of some who have no natural or divining right to be above me, and entirely owe their grandeur and honor to grinding the faces of the poor. It's good writing, and I respect that. But you are a lawyer, and you are coming up to the laborers and being like, we do the same work. We are the same. And they're like, he does well. He's a good talker. Anyway,
People are like that though.
I
They want to
know.
relate so badly with people who they see as being really well off or a celebrity or like have what they want.
Or
They,
think they can also be billionaires.
yeah, they want to relate to them. That doesn't, honestly, it doesn't surprise me that people are like, yeah, I'm like this really wealthy and famous person coming to talk to me.
He came to the tavern. He's just like us.
Mm-hmm.
In the Boston Gazette, someone wrote in 1763 that a few persons in power were promoting political projects for keeping the people poor in order to make them humble. So, like, there's a lot of political writing going on in this time. And it wasn't until I thought about Bridgerton that I was like, I get the influence of writing, especially in this time when really there's no phone calls. People don't have Instagram. Like, this is the Instagram of the time. This is how you get your opinions and your thoughts and your feelings out, which is great because then the Stamp Act of 1765 comes out, which is a direct tax on any printed materials, legal documents, newspapers, playing cards, and guess what? Stamps and pamphlets. The people were pissed. And in Boston, the summer following the Stamp Act, a shoemaker named Ebenezer McIntosh led a mob to destroy this house of a merchant in Boston. And then 2 weeks later, a different crowd showed up to the house of Thomas Hutchinson and destroyed it with axes as they drank from his wine from his wine cellar and they looted his furniture and took it away. Colony
But they
officials,
didn't hurt the people. They
well,
just like
well,
fucked
because
the
they're
shit
rich
up.
people, Randy, so they weren't there.
Yeah.
Oh, right, right, right.
They're
Well, that's
They
I
rich.
they
can
had to
take.
run away, but
They can leave. They're
the
gone now.
guys who did this had a party though. I mean, like they drank like all the booze he had is in his wine
They
cellar.
took everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what it sounds like. They just were ruffians who came in and they were like, "This is mine now."
Right. But here's the thing is that they were not necessarily individual happenings. Colony officials reported that this was part of a larger plan where at least 15 rich people had had their homes destroyed. It was part of a quote, war of plunder, of general leveling and taking away the distinction of rich and poor.
A
But
Robin
James,
Hood situation?
yeah, they were like, we're done. We're getting rid of the
Well,
classes. We're over
so
it.
you know what? That actually probably like when they mention leveling specifically, probably refers to there was a group in the English Civil War called the Levelers who literally they were radicals that
They were a
wanted to.
gang.
No, it was a thing. So like when once people killed the king in England in the 1640s, it's like all bets are off, and that's where like religious groups like the Quakers come from and the Ranters who died out. But the Levelers were a group that wanted to, they were radical in terms of like wanting to overthrow rich people and have a equal society. And that was like the fear of your everyday like elite slash middle class person was they're coming for us and they want to take all of our wealth and distribute it.
I mean, essentially, this whole period is a lot of poor people being like, we're tired of this grandpa, and the rich people being, or the middle class people being like, let's figure out how to make them not mad at us, but we need them
Yeah.
to be mad at the British. And James Otis also did not like this. He wanted them to be mad, but he didn't want them to be trashing everything. And this following part really reminds me of when people are protesting and then people are like, but could you not be looting? How do you think change is made? Anyway, so the British continue trying to tax the colony and the colonial
Also,
leaders, what?
I'm sorry. I
Yeah,
know
go
I'm
ahead.
interrupting. It just took me a second to like get my
No,
thought
I
together.
get it. No, I do that too.
Yeah.
But like, why is that the part that when protests happen, why is the looting what you're focused on? That's also what pisses
Because
me
we
off. Like,
prioritize property over
we're
people.
not talking about the shit that got people to the point where they're having these protests and these riots, but no, let's worry about the inanimate object that is covered by insurance. Yes, let's do that.
Well, because we don't want the businesses to be mad at us.
Also, isn't whatever what the next thing I was gonna say was gonna be very controversial, so I'm actually not going to say it, but
Yes.
it's my own conspiracy theory.
I have a lot of thoughts. So, okay, so the British are still trying to tax the colony, and colonial leaders are organizing boycotts, and they're like, we're doing these protests, but no mobs or tumults. Let the persons and properties of your most inveterate enemies be safe. So I don't care what you feel about other people, but you need to stop breaking everybody's houses. And Samuel Adams was like, no mobs, no confusion, no tumults. I meant to search that word. I didn't. But I'm assuming it means don't be fighting anybody. Just mind your business, do your protests. Everyone's businesses stay intact. But throughout the colonies, there were people fighting against the imbalance of power that they found themselves in. And the Stamp Act made leaders aware of what that severity was. Because there was a lot of protests going on. There were a lot of protests, there's a lot of revolts, riots, fighting everywhere. Colonists protested in a way that was scary to the rich. And according to General Thomas Gage, the Boston mob, raised first by the indignation of the many principal inhabitants, rose shortly of their own accord, attacked, robbed, and destroyed several houses, amongst others that of the lieutenant governor. So he's like, they're all mad. And like initially they were mad about something else. They were mad about the Stamp Act. And then the the leaders lost control of all the poor people that were really, really pissed, and then they just went and destroyed everything. But it wasn't just happening in Boston, it was happening everywhere. Someone wrote to the New York Gazette, is it equitable that 99 rather than 999 should suffer for the extravagance or grandeur of one, especially when it is considered that men frequently owe their wealth to the impoverishment of their neighbors? So like this is in the newspaper. People can read this. Everyone reads this. So it's not like you're hiding your beliefs.
Well, how
And
many
that
people read?
enough people to start a revolution, Randy.
So in New England, it's actually pretty high. Because of the emphasis on like with the Puritans and like on reading the Bible, like
Ooh, I forgot
they
about the
strive for
Bible.
very high literacy, but literacy is different from writing. So just because you can read it this time doesn't mean that you can write. The number of people, and so there's a lot of like colonial documents where it'll be like so and so his mark, and then presumably the original person made their mark, which would be some sort of like symbol or sigil or something that everyone knows like that's your mark. Like it's a weird, complicated thing to do. Sometimes it's just an X. Um, but so you didn't like your average person doesn't necessarily know how to write, but like pretty high, like I would say probably 70-80%, like by the late
Ooh.
colonial period, can read. Like even women, I say even women because like it's
Obviously.
every like that was one thing that they agreed on is that like everybody should read the Bible, right? So it doesn't matter like your sex. But so like with that sort of literacy, even the people that could hear someone read like a
Out
newspaper or a
loud.
pamphlet or something in the coffee houses, which are like huge during this period. This is like basically like you know, a more respectable version of a tavern, um,
So
where
like if you're
people
gonna go read the Bible, it makes sense
yeah, well, but like you could go
at the
hang out
respectable
here and
coffee
hear
house.
someone like Sam Adams or whatever give a speech or read a pamphlet about stuff. Like these were like social places for
Hmm.
people to hang out, and like talk. Like they're drinking, are they drinking coffee? Are they drinking booze? Depends on the place, but like they're hanging out with people and talking about like the shit that's going on.
I hadn't
I
even thought
love that
about
you had
that.
that answer, Greg. I really
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like that's a big part of like Enlightenment culture. Like in Europe too, in French, they have the salons where people are literally gathering. It's more a little bit more upper class, like gathering to talk about philosophy and like what the
Hmm.
latest person has written and stuff. But like the more like normal class of place is the coffee house at this time.
I have always wondered what you do if you don't want to drink beer all day.
Yeah, you hang out at Starbucks and shoot the shit about politics with people.
Yeah, you can't do that now. People look at you weird if
No.
you start talking to people.
Oh, absolutely.
But yes, a lot of stuff was going on. There was a lot of anger and resentment and a lot of class consciousness happening during this time. And in Philadelphia, laborers, artisans, and small tradesmen, helped by some small middle class leaders, launched a full-scale attack on wealth, as well as the right to acquire unlimited private property. So they went in and they just took extra legal measures when politics failed to start limiting what people could have. which was really radical at this time, and even today would be really radical. There were tenant riots in New Jersey, but due to the fact that most landlords lived in England or like in properties far away, they would just go after the farmers who leased the land from the owners. So they just beat up all the farmers. There were the Green Mountain Rebels in Vermont, who were self-described as poor people fatigued in settling a wilderness country, and that their enemies were the number of attorneys and other gentlemen with all their tackle of ornaments and their compliments and French finesse. Those were the enemies.
We're scared of compliments.
Apparently. Because the colonists were so unruly, the crown sent their soldiers to the colonies. And after 1768, 2,000 soldiers were being quartered in Boston and tensions were growing. Rightfully so. I would be pissed if all these guys just showed up and tried to go in your house. The boycotts had meant that shopkeepers and businesses were suffering because nobody was buying anything. And now the soldiers showed up and they were taking the few jobs that were available in the area, which I think is terrible. Imagine being a soldier and you still don't get paid. You have to go get a job on top of being a soldier. Dumb. On March 5th in 1770, a crowd gathered and began messing with the soldiers outside of the custom house. And they just kept teasing them and making them mad. They both just started talking shit to each other and then they fought each other. The British soldiers fired and killed Crispus Attucks and then continued shooting in what would be known as the Boston Massacre. 6 of the British soldiers were acquitted and 2 were punished by having their thumbs branded and then discharged from the army. But they pretty much just got away with killing them. John Adams, the defense attorney for the British soldiers, described the crowd as being full of black, white, Irish, and outlandish jack tars, whatever that means.
Those are
Greg, what does that
sailors.
mean?
Sailor. No, it's sailors. A jacktar is a name for like your common sailor who's sailing on a ship.
And I included that for the obviously telling. The description was way more aggressive than what I have made it to be, but it was very like you could tell there was a mix of people in the crowd that were egging these British soldiers on. And before the beginning of or around this time, like there are fights going on. And most of the time or a lot of the time it is people of all sorts of colors from all regions fighting together against the British, against the rich people. And that's what's happening, and that's what's being seen by these upper middle class revolutionary leaders. And they're like, we can't get them that mad, but we gotta do something about it. So the massacre leads to England taking the troops out of Boston. And so that's how that ends for a little bit. But I'm gonna jump to something else for a second because one of the other suspected reasons for starting a war with the British was the idea floating, there was a new idea floating around in England. And it was that they were going to potentially outlaw owning people. And that was going to be a real big issue for the colonies where most of their money is being made by the cheap labor of enslaved people. So even just the concept of losing that labor was unthinkable. In 1771, James Somerset, an enslaved African, escaped while traveling to England, and his master, Charles Stewart, eventually did recapture him and tried to sell him to a Jamaican plantation, but they were still in England. James Somerset, however, knew his rights. He filed a case, and in 1772, the Court of King's Bench, they ruled that the slavery wasn't technically illegal, but it was not enforceable by law. What does this mean? So Charles could not give them a contract that stated the terms of his condition of his ownership quote of James Somerset. So they didn't know like what is legal, what isn't. We don't have your contract. We don't know if this is acceptable here. So they could not say whether he violated the law. So their ruling was, quote, the black must be discharged. And they let him go. In Massachusetts, at least a dozen of those in bondage who had heard the news just took the opportunity to file their own cases with the British court. while others just ran away because they're like, hey, they're questioning the legality of this. We can go. Rumors of these events were spreading throughout the colony so much so that many believed that, quote, London would cheat an honest American of his slave.
What year was this?
1772.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
That's why I wanted to make sure to include it. I really, my goal for this episode was that I really wanted to talk about what people of color were doing during the Revolutionary War, and I couldn't get to that before this, and then I found this, and I was like, we have to talk about this.
Well, I mean, because they're having their own uprisings, they're having their own issues. It makes sense that they would have sent troops to help the Dutch. You know what I mean? Because of course, they're like, we got to band together. These things are awful. They're causing us all sorts of problems. Like,
And they're happening everywhere.
mm-hmm.
And it's not just our black enslaved people, but also the poor people that we've been profiting off of are mad too.
It's the oppressed. It's just the
Yeah,
oppressed.
it's the oppressed people don't want to be oppressed anymore.
Mm-hmm. However, they've been oppressed. Whichever way it is, they're done.
Yeah. So my water's gone. Revolutionary leaders wanted to spur action against Great Britain, yet they wanted to maintain that control over their oppressed people. They would often feel because the people would be poor and they didn't have anything, and obviously the colonial leaders were unhelpful, so they would go appeal to the British once the fight started. The Sons of Liberty may have been mostly made up of middle class and upper class gentlemen, but they were able to talk to people and they were great speakers. One Virginia speaker addressed the poor and said, "Are not the gentlemen the same as the lowest and poorest among you? Listen to no doctrines which may tend to divide us, but let us go hand in hand, as brothers. We're all the same here." They're up there singing, "We're all in this together."
You know, I never saw those.
I did, I had to, and I sang one of the songs in choir. And it wasn't until Thomas Paine's pamphlet came out in 1776 where a bold argument for independence was made in words that were easy for people to understand. He wrote this pamphlet, Common Sense, to appeal to the reason of people. He said the divine right of kings was given to them by pungent history of the British monarchy. So it's like that's old history. And he described the advantages of staying on the British side, but then he did remind them of the difficulties too. It was his pros and cons list. He was like, it could be good, but it's also bad sometimes. But it was also his pitch to fix it because society in every state is a blessing, but government, even in its best state, is a necessary evil. So, like, someone's got to rule us. It doesn't necessarily have to be the king, though. He put out 25 editions in 1776 because, once again, pamphlets were big. Some, like John Adams, felt that Thomas Paine's plan was so democratic, without any restraint or even any attempt to equilibrium, that it must produce confusion and every evil work. And I'm like, damn, John Adams, I get why he got such a bad rap in Hamilton because
He's
he's like,
basically
everything is
saying
shit.
he's basically saying the common man isn't smart enough to get this. Like,
He's like, this is too much for them.
why are you doing this? You're ruining society. Like, they cannot make decisions for their own. Why would we make this purely demo? Oh, Greg, what?
Can I make a side, like just a side about Thomas Paine because I have some thoughts
I do love
Oh,
thoughts on
on
Thomas Paine because I don't know much about him.
so like I use parts of common sense when I teach history
hmm
in this class, and it's really good. And I think everyone should read it. But like it's really interesting because he really knows how to like put arguments in language that everyday people will understand. And like one of the most revolutionary things that I think he says in that is he's basically like the argument for having kings isn't biblical. Like there's no like the Bible doesn't support this, right? But like he himself doesn't necessarily like he's kind of using the Bible like you can look at this kind of cynically to be like you're using this because you realize that like that's what people will like connect with um because he goes on to write a book later called The Age of Reason during the
hmm
French Revolution that's basically like there's no reason to like God doesn't exist. There's no reason to believe in like the Christian God, which obviously is like huge for the time. And he eventually gets thrown into jail
Yeah.
and writes a letter that we have that he sent to George Washington, begging Washington to like help him out. Because he's like basically like, hey, I did you this favor by like helping your revolution happen. Like, can you help get me out of this situation? And Washington never responds to it. He basically like we have no record of a response, and you know he does nothing to help Paine when he's thrown in jail later for being too radical, right?
Damn. Well, for a little bit, he wasn't super crazy because he
Thomas
did write
Paine.
some he did write some good things.
No, no, I think
No,
all of
it's
his
all
writings are
good.
great.
I
No,
think
no, no,
I
no,
think
no. But what
the
I mean is
moral of the
like
story is that like he got thrown under the bus.
no, no,
Like,
no. Well, like if he wasn't, well, and that's the thing is that mine, well, that what I'm saying that for is because in my next paragraph, I said he didn't necessarily want or condone all the actions of the poor and the middle class to be rioting. Like
mhm.
that's the part that I was like, and he wasn't even that radical.
yeah.
That's the part that I'm like surprised by. It's then like they locked him up, but for a little bit he was useful.
You know what
Be
I think? You know what I think it was too is also it so much of what you just talked about sounded like it felt agendaless. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel like that his approach was a real non-threatening way to get people to become radicalized in that movement.
yes, yeah, he was just putting out information for everyone to understand. But he was not here to speak for the poor necessarily. He was just there to speak for the general class. And he didn't agree with the mob actions of the like that had been occurring up to this point, but he did favor a strong central government. So he did have, I think, his own agendas in putting this out. And he put out the idea of a government that could represent something of a common interest for the people. Like that is known for that's what he is known for. Like he put out that idea that maybe if they had something to agree with or agree on, I guess necessarily, a team to be on, then it would make it easier for them to not join the British forces, not join any forces with people of color because this is your team. These are your people. So they eventually would create a nation where they could take over land, profits, and political power from the British while creating a new leadership that would benefit the people it was supposed to benefit. Up to that point, they were fighting each other and there was little skirmishes, but it was the little colony militias that were fighting each other. And some of them did include people of color. They included black
Mhm.
people. But then when George Washington he was the general of the Continental Army, he kicked out every black person that was in the
Oh
militia.
yeah. I mean, he honestly, for a
He gets
president,
too much
he
credit.
gets, yeah, people don't say enough about the true nature of George Washington and all the shit he did before he got in that fucking boat on the Delaware River, right? So like,
How long do you think you stood for that picture? And he was like, "Look,
it
this is
was,
how it
it
was."
was an imagining. There's no way.
Yeah.
Anyway, not a great man. Not, I mean, in especially when it came to people of color.
No.
Didn't care about the natives, tried to kill them all, kicked out the black and African people. You know, it's not a good look for him.
I feel like it isn't until it's convenient for him that he's like, I guess they could count for something. But they're all like that. And I was reading about how Thomas Jefferson's just like going on about how slavery is terrible, but you still have your own at home.
Oh, and he did.
Yeah, that's the thing that like throughout this research that always makes me so mad is it's like all we hear about is these like seven white guys, and I'm like,
There's a really infamous quote from Jefferson that I like to throw out when I'm teaching this. Um, and so this comes from his notes on the state of Virginia, which is like basically this sort of like accounting of like what is Virginia like, and he's trying to like appeal to intellectual people and writing at the time, and he talks about slavery, and he says a lot of like really awful things about enslaved Africans in terms of like describing like their looks and how they smell and stuff like that. But when he's talking about slavery, he describes it as like having the wolf by the ears, like basically like we're in this and there's nothing we can do about it. It's the ultimate kind of like like there's nothing we can do because like you've grabbed this wolf by the ears and like yeah, it's kind of bad, but if you let go, you're gonna get bitten, right?
What does that even mean,
That
Greg?
I
is
know,
not,
right? But this
that's
is
not
like
a great
his big
metaphor.
defense of kind of like this is the situation we're in and like yeah, there's nothing we can really do about it.
What do you mean? We just got in. I don't know how, you know what? This reminds me of
Oh, it's
whenever people
No,
cheat.
ridiculous.
it's
When people cheat, they're like, I fell on it. It's the same shit. I just ended
no,
up
it's
here
just
and now there's consequences if I let go. I don't
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
you would also have to be like, the wolf was so big that I could then write it, and I allowed all my friends to abuse it, and I then bred it with these other wolves that I had that my friends had also captured, and then I rode it around until it broke its back, and that is the comparison, right? Because like
It's
that
because
is
they
so
always want
tame.
to be the
That is
victim, Randy.
wildly
They
Yeah.
tame.
always want to be the victim.
Yeah. Oh,
It is a
yeah.
victim
There's a
mentality.
lot of like
It's not my
we were
fault.
just put in
I
this
was just
position.
someone put me here. That's some bullshit. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's basically the story today. This is the situation that got us to fighting each other, basically. They're like, well, we need to put them somewhere. We need to make them
And
mad at somebody else.
to all the people who are like, this is not America, what we're in right now. This is absolutely America.
It's
This has
Amer
always been America. And what we're talking about right now is telling you why this is the way
Literally,
America
all
is.
of this was like Fox News did this, and then Fox News did that, and then Fox News did this, and then they were like, the Mexicans are stealing your jabs, and it's like that the whole
Yeah.
time I kept seeing I that South Park episode where they make the rednecks of the town be Alexa. If you haven't watched that, it's something
I
else, and
haven't.
they're in a bar and they're like, we're all here because Alexa took our jobs. The immigrants took our jobs. And then they're like, okay, we got an idea for you. So then they take them and they give them like phone books and they have her phone there and they're like, Jim Bob, play this song. And then he brings out his banjo and he's like playing Kendrick Lamar. It's a classic. I love it.
I need to see that.
No,
I have not seen that.
it's that's basically this episode. They're like, someone took our jobs. It was the British. It was this. And then when the British are gone, they're like, it's the rich people. They have our jobs. Whatever. It's their fault. There's no money.
It is the rich people's fault. There's
Anyway,
no money.
but yeah, I wanted to talk about everything else, but then,
Well, you'll get a chance to.
the
The
history.
episode we're recording right after this is going to be, what did we say, 1667.
That's
So you'll,
1767.
oh God, why do I keep saying that? 1767. You're absolutely right, Karina. 1767. That's going to be a rough one for everyone. A little teaser of anticipation. I will be covering the Mason-Dixon line, the survey of that, and then unlike what Karina said, where I normally end in the year that we pick and she starts in the year, right? That's what you said, Karina.
Yeah, I did say that. Because usually I feel like I'm at the beginning
Yeah,
of the story.
and my story culminates in the year. I will be doing it Karina's way because we will obviously follow the Mason-Dixon line.
That'll be fun. I
It's
don't know. I don't know what I'll talk about because I haven't gotten there yet.
it's gonna be intense, but I hope you all are ready for it. We're gonna learn together. We're gonna learn together, y'all.
I feel like I've learned a lot this episode. Like I genuinely was like, what the fuck is this? What the fuck is that? What is that? What is this? Who am I? Like, what do you mean Guyana's a place?
Guyana. Yeah,
Guyana. Yeah.
Guyana versus Ghana.
Hmm. What did we learn today, Randy? So much.
Honestly, I'm still processing what Greg said.
That could literally be anything.
There is actually so much that
Yeah,
what Greg said is upsetting me.
the whole thing. It's worse
I
than
don't
whatever
know.
you don't know where who wrote the pirate book. Like, this is worse than that. You know what really fucked me up?
Tell
Learning
me.
that nobody knows who what's his name? Shakespeare really is. Like that really fucked me up.
Yeah, and they say that the works, there are so many works that they can't tell that all are attributed to him. It's like one of
Hmm.
those things that Greg was talking about where they just have people who are like, I'm an expert in Shakespeare's works, and I will tell you if this is Shakespeare or not. And you're
No,
like,
literally.
yeah, you're like, go, dude, decide.
I couldn't read any. I just know like one part of Hamlet, and it was only because I did it for a play, and that's the part that I memorized.
Not to discredit Shakespeare, he's just not my favorite. Just not.
That's
Romeo and
fair.
Juliet is actually very disturbing to me.
It is disturbing. It's like watching it. It's like Twilight when you read it as an adult. It's traumatic. These 13-year-olds get together. They're 13. They're like, we're in love. This is it. And then your parents won't let you hang out, and so you kill yourself. That's not healthy. Anyway, yeah, that's
That's not healthy.
that's where we're gonna leave it. That's the end of that. Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of Sip and Saga Society. If you enjoyed today's episode and would like to support our historical endeavors, please visit our website at sipandsaga.online. We also are on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok
In Discord,
and Discord.
I monitor that every day, guys. So if you want to talk to us,
We're out
pop it
there.
on in there.
And if you comment on YouTube, I'll find it one day. Thank you so much for everyone that has supported us up to this journey. There are a lot of changes coming, but I'm excited to see where we go. And also, thank you so much for listening to this episode. But for right now, we gotta go. Bye. See you next week, next time, next listen.
Oh,
No, you're
adios.
fine, you're right.
Yeah,
Bye.
yeah, you wrapped it up so well, Karina.